Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. This is Wes from Carl Wesley Sewing Patterns, and today in this video I'm going to show you my method for inserting a standard centered zipper. A centered zipper is the most common kind of zipper that you will find on garments, such as on the back of a dress or a skirt, and this is the kind of zipper that I use most often. Before we get started, let's talk about shortening a zipper because it's super easy, and chances are if you do a lot of sewing, at some point you will not be able to find the exact correct length and color zipper you need, so you will have to buy a longer one and shorten it. To shorten a standard nylon coil zipper, use colored chalk and place a marking where you want the new zipper stop to be. Set your sewing machine to a zigzag stitch on the widest possible width and a 0 length. Place about 10 or so stitches directly over the coil where you want the new zipper stop to be. Finally, trim your threads and use your fabric shears to trim off the excess of the zipper about 1 inch below your stitching. Now that we have the zipper the correct length, let's go ahead and prep the seam before we stitch our zipper. For demonstration purposes, I will be inserting the zipper into a seam between 2 rectangles of fabric, but the process would be the same if you were putting a zipper into an actual garment. Also, for demonstration purposes, I will be using contrasting thread and a contrasting color zipper, but typically you would pick a zipper and thread that match the color of your fabric. The first thing I'm going to do is take 2 1-inch wide strips of fusible interfacing and press them to the wrong sides of the fabric along the edges where the zipper will be inserted. You don't need to interface the entire length of the seam, only the area where the zipper will be inserted. This step is really important because it will stabilize the fabric where we will attach the zipper, making it much easier to sew. The next thing you need to do is finish the raw edges of the fabric where the zipper will be inserted. In this case, I will just be using a serger to finish the raw edges. However, you can use whatever method you like, maybe a zigzag stitch or binding if that's your preference. However, if the fabric you are using doesn't ravel, or if you will be adding a lining to your garment, you can skip this step. When you add a lining to the garment, the lining will be slip stitched to the zipper tape later, and that will enclose all the raw edges. Next, we need to close the seam where the zipper will be inserted. Make a note where there is a notch or some other kind of marking on your pattern where they want the zipper to end. Place your fabrics right sides facing, and then we're going to run a basting stitch to join the seam where the zipper will be inserted, back tack at the zipper notch, and then close the rest of the seam with a normal stitch length. The seam allowance you will use here will depend on your pattern, but it is probably 5/8 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch. As I start stitching the seam, I have my sewing machine set at the longest length straight stitch, which is going to be our basting stitch, until we reach the zipper notch. Once I reach the zipper notch, I switch my sewing machine to a normal 2.5 stitch length, back tack, and then finish the rest of the seam with the regular stitch length. Here's a diagram showing the stitching we just completed on the seam where the zipper will be inserted. Next, press the seam open with steam. We want to get this seam nice and flat before we stitch in the zipper. Now here is where I get out my secret weapon for inserting zippers. I'm going to use something called wash-away seam tape, which comes on a roll, and it is a double-sided tape to temporarily secure fabric. It's typically sold as a quilting product, and I will drop a link in the description below to help you find it. Stick a length of wash-away seam tape along the edge of the seam allowances where the zipper will be inserted. In my case, it will be placed directly over the serging. A little bit of pressure with your finger will stick it down, but it is not so sticky that you can't pull it back up if you need to reposition the tape. After you get the seam tape applied to the edges of both seam allowances, go ahead and peel off the paper on top, and that will reveal the stickiness on the top side. Here's a closer look at the seam tape applied to the seam allowances after the paper has been peeled off. This tape is temporary and will dissolve in water when you first wash the garment. Now, take your zipper and place it so that the coil is laying directly in the middle of the seam. Use care to try and make sure the zipper coil is perfectly centered, because we don't want to sew in a crooked zipper. A little bit of pressure with your fingers will be enough to stick the zipper down to the tape and the fabric, but if you're not happy with the placement, go ahead and pull the zipper back up and reposition it. Here's another look from my vantage point so that you can see how I carefully lay the zipper coil along the seam line. Now, this next part is a little controversial, but bear with me. So notice how the zipper is placed a little bit above the top edge of the fabric with the zipper pull off the edge. That is very intentional. I learned how to sew zippers this way because you don't want the zipper pull to get in the way while you're stitching down the zipper. I always position my zippers this same way, and the excess zipper tape above the fabric will just get caught in the facing or the lining of your garment. This is different from the standard way, which would be to position the edge of the zipper tape so that it matches the edge of the fabric. Obviously, I'm biased, and I think the way I position my zippers works the best and is the easiest to sew, but I have had several seamstresses tell me that this is totally wrong. I encourage you to try some different zipper sewing methods to see what works best for you, and if you have an opinion on this zipper placement, please drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Now that we have the zipper stuck down with seam tape, we are ready to sew the zipper in. Turn your garment over so that the right side of the fabric is facing up. Starting at the top edge of the fabric, we are going to stitch down along one side of the zipper, stitch across the bottom, and then come back up on the other side of the zipper. You will need to switch to your zipper sewing foot, and this image shows how I position the foot when I go to sew the zipper down. I like to line up the right side of the square edge of the zipper foot so that it lines up directly with the seam line, and this will keep my stitching perfectly straight all the way down and back up the zipper. If you have a different type of zipper foot, this placement may not be exactly the same for you, but just know that the stitching should be about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch away from the seam line. It doesn't matter if you start stitching on the right or the left side of the zipper, just start at the top edge of the fabric near where the zipper pull is located. For the purposes of this tutorial, I placed a chalk mark on the seam line so that it's easier to see on video, but you don't necessarily have to do this on your own garment. Stitch slowly and carefully using both hands to guide the fabric, because we want our zipper to be sewn as perfectly as possible. I like to look underneath the fabric occasionally to see how close I'm getting to the end of the zipper. Here's a view from a different angle so that you can see how I have the right side of the square part of the zipper foot lined up with the seam line. Continue stitching until you have reached a point just a little bit below the stop on the zipper coil. Next, sink the needle and pivot your fabric at a 90-degree angle to stitch across the bottom of the zipper. It will only take about 4 to 6 stitches to cross the bottom of the zipper, then sink the needle again and pivot so that you can stitch back up the other side of the zipper. As you stitch up the remaining side of the zipper, the position of the presser foot will be the same as the first side. We're almost finished. All that's left to do is to take your seam ripper and pull out the stitches along the seam line where the zipper is located. Since we used basting stitches here, they should come out really easily. Go ahead and pull out all the loose threads, and then your zipper is complete. Congrats! Now you have a perfectly sewn centered zipper. At this point, you can go ahead and continue sewing your pattern to complete your garment. Thank you for taking some time to watch my video tutorial, and I hope my method will have you sewing perfect zippers every single time. As always, if you have any additional questions, please drop a comment below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. If you enjoyed this tutorial, I hope you will share it with others who might find it useful. I'd also really appreciate it if you took a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel, because that helps me reach even more viewers with useful sewing videos. That's it for me. I'll see you in the next video, and in the meantime, happy sewing!